Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, co-presented by Skoda Superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
On this day last year, China finally told the World Health Organization about a kind of pneumonia due to an unknown cause in Wuhan. 1 year on, China has still not revealed the cause. The World Health Organization has still not begun an investigation, and Wuhan is partying. As for the rest of the world, after suffering trillions in losses and millions of lives lost, it is imposing fresh rounds of lockdowns. Mutated viruses are on the prowl, but China is not worried about any of this. Its president today has declared the pandemic over. He has declared China's victory over China's virus. Behind the hubris, what is China's status? What has the pandemic done to the country, its president, and his dreams of world domination? Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss. We'll also talk about what 2021 has in store for China. President Xi Jinping has tried to set the narrative with a New Year's speech today. We'll tell you what he said. Also on the show, a week-long multi-million-dollar New Year party has kicked off a storm in Brazil. At the center of it is star footballer Neymar. In Pakistan, another Hindu temple has been destroyed. Protests followed. The case has reached the Supreme Court. In Uganda, a pop star tried to unseat a president who's been in power for decades. He's been arrested. We'll tell you what happened next. In fact, what happens next is the million-dollar question. As the year ends, we look at the forecast for 2021. What's in store for India and the world? We'll talk about that too. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
A vaccination dry run will be held across India on the 2nd of January. India's health ministry has said the activity is to be conducted in all state capitals and some districts with difficult terrain or poor logistical support. The US has reported its record daily COVID-19 death toll since the start of the pandemic. 3,927 people lost their lives in the last 24 hours. With almost 190,000 new cases. America's overall case tally has crossed 19.7 million. Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai had his bail revoked on Thursday after prosecutors succeeded in asking the highest court to send him back to detention. Pro-democracy activists in Taipei have voiced strong opposition against the prosecution and appealed for Lai's release. Lai was granted bail on December 23rd after 3 weeks in custody on charges of fraud and endangering national security. The appeal hearing is slated for February 1st. Uganda opposition presidential candidate Robert Kyagulanyi, popularly known as Bobi Wine, has been arrested for violating social distancing norms. The arrest triggered protests over the government's crackdown on dissent ahead of the election. Yemeni Prime Minister Muin Abdul Malik Saeed visited the injured at a hospital in Aden, a day after at least 26 people were killed when explosions rocked Yemen's Aden airport. The attack took place shortly after a new unity government arrived at the airport from Saudi Arabia. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's father is in the process of applying for a French passport to maintain his ties with the European Union after Brexit. Stanley Johnson is a former member of the European Parliament and voted to remain in Britain's 2016 referendum. He says he wants to become a French citizen because of strong family links to France. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has said the country will hold a referendum on constitutional changes without specifying the date. The leader has faced weekly protests since claiming victory in an August election that the opposition says was rigged. Pakistan opposition alliance Pakistan Democratic Movement will hold a key meeting on the 1st of January. The deadline for its workers to submit their resignations from Parliament to their respective parliamentary leaders expires on the 31st of December. The 11-party alliance has two major parties, the PPP and PMLN. Majority of the lawmakers of both these parties have submitted their resignations to their leaders. Seven-time Formula One champion Lewis Hamilton has been knighted in the Queen's New Year Honours List. The Brit equaled Michael Schumacher's record of 7 titles this season and also broke the record for most wins by a driver in Formula One. For all his success, 2020 was a defining year as Hamilton became a leading voice in the fight against racial inequality and pushed successfully for change within Formula One to be more inclusive. Basketball great LeBron James notched up another record as champions Los Angeles Lakers beat San Antonio Spurs 121-107 for their first away win of the season. Birthday boy James scored 10 points or more for the 1,000th consecutive game and was top scorer for the Lakers with 26 points. The Lakers had lost their last game but had a 9-point lead at the end of the first quarter and did not allow the momentum to flag. James's double-digit streak began way back in January 2007 when he was playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Today is the 31st of December, the last day of what has been a difficult year. I'm sure you're all looking forward to new beginnings and a better 2021. But tonight, I want to begin with what happened exactly 1 year ago, 31st December 2019. On this very day, China finally told the World Health Organization about the virus outbreak. The WHO country office in China was informed about the first cases in Wuhan. Pneumonia of unknown cause. That is how they described it. 5 days later, the WHO told the world about this outbreak. By then, though, it was too late. The virus first spread across Wuhan, then across China, within days across the world, and within a year, it has reached more than 190 countries and regions. It is a pandemic, the biggest of our lifetimes. The pandemic began in China. It infected the world. Today, the world is struggling with mutations of the Wuhan virus. What is China doing? Declaring a victory. What is Wuhan doing? It had a grand party with people out and about. No masks, no social distancing. China beamed these pictures far and wide today. It was trying to make a point. Its president then made a speech. His annual New Year address, where he sets the tone for the year ahead, an opportunity to set a new narrative. Xi Jinping made the most of this opportunity today. The president was in his office in Beijing, and today he declared he declared China's victory over China's virus. He said China wrote an epic in the fight against the Wuhan virus.
2020 is an extraordinary year. Facing the sudden outbreak of the novel coronavirus epidemic, we placed people and their lives at top priority and achieved the great love of humanity. With solidarity and perseverance, we wrote the epic of our fight against the epidemic.
That was the beginning. In a speech that lasted 11 minutes, Xi Jinping painted China as a country that is immune to the virus. He said their growth is back on track. In fact, they will register positive economy growth. with a GDP of around $14 trillion. Xi Jinping said China has defeated extreme poverty. He claimed that close to 100 million rural Chinese have been pulled out of poverty in 8 years. He even said that China has defeated severe flooding. So to sum it up, Xi Jinping declared the pandemic over in China, and the country, he said, is back on track.
China is the first major economy in the world to achieve positive growth. The GDP is expected to step up to a new level of 100 trillion yuan. After experiencing a year of ups and downs, we have a deeper understanding now more than ever of the significance of a community with a shared future for mankind.
A shared future for mankind, a new pitch for the new year from China. That's what Xi Jinping wants you to remember. But here is what he conveniently skipped from that 11-minute-long speech. Xi Jinping claimed that the Chinese economy has bounced back. But he did not share with the world or with the Chinese the growing defaults in his country. This year's bond defaults have touched $25 billion. Xi Jinping says China is now a moderately prosperous society, but economists predict that 80 million people were thrown out of work during the worst phase of the pandemic in China. Of course, Xi Jinping made no mention of China's lapses during this outbreak, but that would be too much to expect. Because on the same day last year, when the Chinese government had informed the WHO about the outbreak in Wuhan, Xi Jinping was delivering his New Year speech, 31st December 2019, and he made no mention of the Wuhan virus. Instead, he boasted that China now has diplomatic relations with 180 countries around the world. He said that China now has friends in every corner of the world. 1 year later, the Chinese president is back, this time spearheading the effort to burnish China's image, to shift the conversation around the pandemic from China's lapses to how successfully it defeated the virus. This is the challenge that lies ahead for the world in 2021. How to see through this sustained propaganda, how to hold China accountable for its lapses, for its lies, and for the cover-up of a pandemic that has now infected more than 80 million people worldwide and killed close to 2 million. And all through this year, we have reported about the virus and what China tried to hide from the rest of the world. How it bullied other countries, how it tried to grab territory that belonged to others. Will the year ahead be different? Will China try to mend its ways, tone down the aggression, or double down its efforts to try to control the world? What does the year 2021 hold for China?
China ruled the headlines in 2020 and it wants to do the same in 2021. Hopefully not with another virus. As of now, this is Beijing's plan. It wants to throw a grand party. The celebration will probably last the entire year because the Communist Party will celebrate its 100th birthday. Xi Jinping wants the spotlight on China as he continues with his mission to place China at the center of the world. But it won't be easy. In 2021, China is expected to face challenges on multiple fronts as democracies push back against Beijing. The battle will play out in different theaters. On the military front, Beijing will remain assertive. China's relationship will remain tense with its neighbors. The threat of an armed conflict is real since the PLA remains active on multiple fronts. This includes the border with India, around Taiwan, the South China Sea, as well as in the East China Sea where China and Japan are locked in a dispute over islands. The Communist Party faces bigger challenges at home. In 2020, China intensified its human rights abuses in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Inner Mongolia. Beijing's crackdown has caught the attention of the world, including the incoming Biden administration in America. Joe Biden is expected to rally support of allies to highlight China's rights abuses. and embarrass Beijing on the world stage. The situation in Hong Kong could complicate Beijing's bid for world domination. With countries like the United Kingdom opening their doors, large number of people are expected to leave Hong Kong. Pro-democracy protesters are seeking asylum in the West. The decision to impose the national security law crushed the protest this year. But the public anger remains. Another major protest cannot be ruled out in 2021. Public discontent translates into leadership challenges, even in a veritable dictatorship like China. Xi Jinping is wary of the threats that could challenge the one-party rule. In 2021, he will try to further tighten his hold over China. He has begun laying the ground. A few weeks back, he called for a meeting of the Politburo. The Chinese president had new orders for his party. Xi Jinping wants the Politburo to build a holistic national security architecture, one that covers everything. Xi Jinping listed 10 priorities. Part of the list was safeguarding China's one-party political system. China's virus ruined its global reputation in 2020. The cover-up made it worse. So did the military campaigns to seize disputed territories. President Xi begins 2021 with a massive trust deficit, both at home and outside. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
"2020 has been a disaster for China, as for all of us, thanks to China. It has become permanently associated with the biggest challenge of our times, the Wuhan virus. Xi Jinping wanted to profit from this pandemic. Little did he know that this move will boomerang and kill his dreams of making China the world leader. Today, Beijing, like the rest of the world, is bidding goodbye to 2020. It can also safely bid goodbye to its superpower dreams, and I'm happy to explain why. Beijing has the blood of nearly 2 million people on its hands. It is equally responsible for around 83 million Wuhan virus infections the world over. How can the world trust a country that caused the biggest health crisis of our times? Do you know how much it cost us? $16 trillion, 16 trillion. 400 million jobs lost, 24 million students dropping out of school, businesses shuttered, brands pushed into bankruptcy, a recession that has touched all 5 continents. This is what China gave the world in 2020. How can the world trust such a country? China has earned itself its biggest trust deficit ever. And Xi Jinping has earned himself comparisons with Nazi dictator Hitler. The world has seen how, just like Hitler, Xi Jinping is capable of killing people in cold blood. His regime, too, has seen people disappear if they question the state, face punishment if they speak the truth. Be it a citizen journalist reporting on Wuhan, a doctor warning the world about an outbreak, or an outspoken real estate tycoon. This pandemic has also exposed the corruption in Xi Jinping's regime. The world knows about China's test kit blunders, how Xi Jinping's men struck secret deals with firms linked to the CCP, how they botched up testing. The pandemic not only exposed the corruption, it also exposed the extent of it. How China got the WHO chief, Dr. Tedros, to play accomplice, how it blocked a Wuhan virus discussion at the United Nations Security Council, how it kept Taiwan away. Where does this leave the president's pet project, the ambitious Belt and Road Initiative? Xi Jinping had a 2-part plan to rule the world. The first part was through technology and the second through infrastructure, through the Chinese debt traps. Now the president is going after the biggest tech name in China himself, Jack Ma. He's facing the heat. And the world is rejecting Chinese technology, starting with Huawei and Chinese apps. As for Chinese infrastructure, the banks do not have that kind of cash to burn anymore. So it's a bumpy road ahead for the BRI and for Xi Jinping's dreams for China. Our next story is about privilege, a pretty nickname for unfair distribution of resources. It is systemic. it is reflected in the rights and means available to individuals. Of course, you can't blame someone for having privilege. Who wouldn't like it? But you can blame those who misuse it. And tonight we'll tell you about one such man. You may have heard of him, Neymar, a footballer who happens to be the world's fourth highest paid athlete. He is on a 5-year contract with Paris Saint-Germain. His salary is worth $350 million. His transfer to PSG is said to have been the most expensive in the world at $263 million. And football fans can back me up on this. 2020 has perhaps been one of the best years for Neymar, which is why he's throwing a grand party as the year comes to an end. On your screen are images of Neymar's luxury beachside mansion near Rio de Janeiro. The Brazilian media says the footballer is throwing a lavish New Year's Eve party here, a party that will last a week, with up to 500 people on the guest list. Reports say this party will cost more than $700,000. But money is not the issue here. It is theirs to spend. The issue is the timing and the setting. The pandemic is not over. The death toll in Brazil is rising. It is the second highest in the world, with more than 193,000 deaths. The city Neymar's party is being held in, Rio, is one of the worst hit. The footballer's lawyer insists that Neymar is throwing no such party. But with models and celebrities constantly flying to Rio, absolutely nobody is convinced.
Kiki Passo, Michelle Nevius, Jessica Bartlett, Fernanda Broom, Annalise Bittencourt, and Camila Remedy. These are just a few A-list models and influencers who are in Rio for a week-long New Year's extravaganza. The venue is Neymarland, this $8 million mansion owned by Brazilian midfielder Neymar da Silva Santos Jr. This 10,000 square meter property features a helipad, a tennis court, a spa, a sauna, a massage room, a gym, and food and drinks. The celebrations reportedly began on Christmas Day. They are expected to last till the 1st of January. The estimated cost of this jamboree is more than $776,000. The front pages of almost all Brazilian dailies have been flooded with the news. Its timing and the exorbitant expenditure have outraged many.
We are really facing a difficult period. I am a survivor of COVID. I spent days in the ICU and with all the care I got, contaminated while working. So I believe that you have to be careful, avoid crowds, and people are not believing that. Neymar is a big star, but that doesn't make him above others. You know, he has to think because he thinks that suddenly it is like this. Whoever is with him can go with him, and it's not. Anyone can get contaminated.
Brazil has suffered heavily in this pandemic. With more than 194,000 deaths, it has the second highest death toll in the world. Health authorities are pushing for social distancing and isolation to avoid worsening the situation. Neymar's lawyers say the footballer has nothing to do with the party. They say it's being organized by a private company, Agência Fabrica. But the presence of the footballer at this mansion says otherwise. Brazilians are furious. Neymar is in hot water. His self-goal could not only dent his image, but could also endanger many more lives. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
Argentina has legalized abortion. We told you all about it yesterday. The world is welcoming Argentina's new law, but there is one man who is very unhappy. You can take a guess and know he's not in the Vatican. He is in Brazil. President Jair Bolsonaro. Look at what he said, and I'm quoting from his post. "I deeply regret the lives of Argentine children now subject to being cut in their mothers' wombs with the consent of the state. As far as it depends on me and my government, abortion will never be approved on our soil. We will always fight to protect the lives of the innocent." What do you make of these words? First of all, the president would rather a mother dies of complications than safely abort. Do you know that there are almost 55 million abortions every year in the world? 55 million, and almost half of them, according to the World Health Organization, are unsafe. Do the math. Why are they unsafe? Because women are denied safe and legal abortions. The Brazilian president says his government will never allow it. And then he goes on to say that we will always fight to protect the innocent. What a noble mission. Why was the pandemic an exception then when innocent people were left to die in Brazil? Bolsonaro's comments show that while Latin American countries like Argentina are trying to progress, Brazil is walking backwards. This country only allows abortion in case of rape, risk to the mother's health, or when the fetus is unlikely to survive. Brazil, in fact, is erecting new barriers to discourage women from seeking abortion, even in the case of rape. As recent as August this year, new rules were imposed. These rules require Brazil's health personnel to contact the police if a woman approaches them seeking abortion after rape. And this is regardless of what the woman wants, whether or not she wants to report to the police about the rape. The government of Brazil has also set up a hotline. It's not for the women. It is for the medical workers, so they can report women and girls who they think have had an illegal abortion. Isn't someone's medical history supposed to be confidential? How are any of these measures pro-life? At least 200 women die every year in Brazil because of complications from unsafe abortion. And this is the health ministry's data. The actual figures are expected to be much higher. One estimate says 1 in 5 women in Brazil has had an abortion by the age of 40. 20%. 1 in 5. So Brazil's so-called pro-life measures are essentially just violating human rights. They deny women the right to health care. Not everyone in this country is in favor of this, including Bolsonaro's vice president. Look at what he told a media outlet in 2019. And I'm quoting again, abortion must be a woman's decision. And he's right, it should be. And it is in most countries. The world has accepted this for a while now, has had this practice for a while now. In Latin America, only 3 countries allow abortion. Why is the continent lagging behind? Mostly because of the enormous influence of the Catholic Church. Some leaders, like Argentina's president, Eduardo Fernandez, are now trying to bring about change. Others, like Brazil's president, Bolsonaro, understand neither healthcare nor the concept of choice. He called the Wuhan virus a little flu before he tested positive for it, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Bolsonaro is now talking about protecting the lives of innocents. More than 193,000 people have died of the Wuhan virus in Brazil. The government did not do enough to save them. He did not do enough to save mothers who were pregnant. At least 134 pregnant women had died by July. It is the last day of December today. I don't want to think about what the death toll is now. Instead, I want to wrap this with a question. If Bolsonaro's pro-life sermon is not hypocrisy, what is? Speaking of which, Pakistan, where another Hindu temple has been destroyed. This time, the images are on camera, how an angry mob led by clerics set a temple on fire. A protest followed. The Chief Justice of Pakistan has taken up the matter. He will hear the case, but minorities in this country are not too hopeful. Persecution has become a way of life for them. Let me give you one statistic that tells the entire story. Hindus in Pakistan made up close to 15% of the population 70 years ago. Today, they make up less than 2% of the population.
This is Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in Pakistan. What you see is the desecration and demolition of a Hindu temple. An angry mob of Muslims converged on this temple. They ripped the bricks from the walls and set them on fire. The crowd cheering the destruction was led by Islamic clerics. It comes as a shock to most of us, this brazen attack on minorities in Pakistan. But for the Hindus who prayed at this temple, history is repeating itself. The shrine that now lies completely destroyed has been demolished before. First built in 1919, the temple was destroyed back in 1997. It was allowed to be rebuilt only after the Supreme Court of Pakistan intervened. That was in 2015. The temple was rebuilt just a few years back. Now it lies in ruins again. On Thursday, a group of Hindus took to the streets to protest the destruction. For them, this was an attack on their faith. The pretext to strike was illegal construction. A small property was built next to the temple. Some locals wrongfully termed it an unauthorized expansion of the shrine. The local police allowed the protest to go ahead. But the Islamic clerics riled up the crowds with incendiary speeches. The horror unfolded right in the backyard of Imran Khan's party. The Tehreek-e-Insaf has controlled this province since 2013. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa propelled Imran Khan to prime ministership. Even today, the province is governed by the PTI. The remains of the temple tell the story of minorities in Pakistan. Muslims make up 97% of the country's population. Hindus, less than 2%. Nearly 8 million Hindus live in the shadow of fear. Under Imran Khan, the attacks have intensified. In 2019, the province of Sindh saw 2 separate incidents where mobs attacked Hindu properties and places of worship. A Hindu school principal was accused of insulting Muslims. An angry mob took to the streets. A Hindu temple was ransacked. Several homes belonging to the minority community were damaged. What is the Prime Minister doing to address this? For now, he is busy lecturing India on how to treat minorities. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And now to the biggest story from Africa. Bobi Wine, a pop star turned politician, has been arrested in Uganda. For those of you who do not know him, Mr. Wine is the leading presidential candidate of his country. He was once a singer. He's now regarded as a champion of equal rights. 38-year-old Wine is seeking to end the 34-year-long rule of the president of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni. It's a David versus Goliath story. And here it is.
Fellow Ugandans, citizens of the world, as you can see, we've been hijacked here by the police and the military. Nobody is talking to us. They're just arresting people, beating people. We don't know what is happening. We don't know what is going to happen to us. The military has blocked us. Nobody is talking to us. Nobody is answering any question.
This was the last message shared by Robert Kyagulanyi, also known as Bobi Wine, before his arrest. A singer, an actor, a businessman, and now the leading presidential candidate of Uganda.
A generation which has said in the past and continue to say, we are not your slaves.
On the 30th of December, Wednesday, Bobi Wine and his campaign team were arrested in Kalangala in central Uganda. Images from the scene showed Wine surrounded by police officers and military troops armed with rifles. The arrest followed weeks of violence, which Ugandan authorities say was orchestrated by Bobi Wine. But critics blame the government for this violence. They say the government is unnecessarily cracking down on supporters of Bobi Wine, who is seeking to end the long rule of President Yoweri Museveni. 76-year-old Museveni has been the president of Uganda since 1986. His presidency has been marred with conflicts, rebellions, political suppression, and consecutive humanitarian emergencies. He is now seeking a 6th term as Uganda goes to polls on January 14th. But 38-year-old pop star Bobby Wine has become a lightning rod for opposition to Museveni. Many young Ugandans see Wine as their champion in a country mired in poverty and unemployment. His arrest has become a flashpoint. The protests have escalated. The tensions have reached a tipping point. The consequences could be severe.
We have told you before, and we continue to tell you, that no amount of brutality, no amount of tear gas, no amount of torture or pepper spray is going to stop us.
Bureau Report, we own. World is one.
They say the true test of leadership is how well you respond to a crisis, how well you function in a crisis. This pandemic will go down as a crisis that tested the skills of world leaders like no other. It caught every country off guard. So how did the leaders of the world perform? How did the public perceive their performance? A US-based research firm has come up with a list. They have assessed the approval ratings of 13 world leaders based on the views of people who voted them to power. On top of this list is the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, with the highest approval ratings. What about other world leaders? Here's a report.
A once-in-a-lifetime pandemic is the ultimate test of leadership. No sops or speeches work when people's life is at stake. As 2020 ends, how did the leaders of the world fare in this test? Some lost office, others lost face. Now we have a report card of world leaders, where they were judged by the people who voted them to power. Who delivered the best in a test that nobody was prepared for? A poll conducted by US-based research firm Morning Consult has thrown up an interesting result. According to this data firm, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's approval ratings are the highest among 13 world leaders. The firm calculated the approval ratings for leaders in these countries on a weekly basis. The net approval was assessed with the share of each country's residents that approve, minus the share that disapprove of their respective head of state. The results look like this. On the 13th spot is French President Emmanuel Macron. The leader, who recently faced an Islamic backlash, has a net approval rating of minus 25%. The newly sworn-in Prime Minister in Japan, Yoshihide Suga, is on the 12th spot with minus 23% approval. The Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, is on the 11th spot with an approval rating of minus 22%. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is on the 10th spot despite getting Brexit done. His net approval rating is minus 18%. The outgoing President of the United States, Donald Trump, is on the 9th spot with an approval rating of minus 15%. The controversial President of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, stands at number 8 with an approval rating of minus 3%. The President of South Korea, Moon Jae-in, is on the 7th spot with minus 2% in approval ratings. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is on the 6th spot with an approval rating of 11%. The Prime Minister of Italy, Giuseppe Conte, comes next with an approval rating of 16%. Followed by the German Chancellor Angela Merkel with an approval rating of 24%. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison is on the 3rd spot. His approval rating is an impressive 27%. On the 2nd spot is the President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, with an approval rating of 29%. And on the 1st spot is the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, with an approval rating of 55%. The pandemic has failed to dent his popularity at home and influence outside. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
This pandemic has led to several businesses shutting down, many industries incurring unprecedented losses. And now one profitable industry in Ukraine has been left in the lurch. A wicker weaving village has no takers for its products.
This craftsman is now struggling to make a living. Generations of his family have relied on wicker work. Once it was a profitable craft, and now with borders shut down due to the pandemic, his wicker weaves have no buyers.
Батьки робили, дідики з бабкою робили, та й ми вже робимо. То вже так поконав віка йде, у діти дітям. Усі роблять, та й ми робимо. Но раніше було вигодно робити, а тепер так. Лише щоб прожити, не є аж так, як раніше, що машини купляли, хати строїли, тепер так не заплетеш, бо не в та ситуація.
This is the Iza village in Ukraine, where scores of families harvest willow saplings. Since the 18th century, this craft has been their main source of income. It is a family business. So much so that each household has their own plot to cultivate willow. Willow is planted, harvested and then boiled and dried. It is then transformed into a bevy of products, from wicker baskets to large sofas. Most of the 7,000 villagers of Iza participate in wicker weaving, and it is intensive work.
Ото треба раз поорати землю, посадити, його треба копати 4-5 раз на літо, або бурян не бив, бо воно виросло. Пак його треба різати, як уже є осінь, як є морози. Сортувати, варити, 3 години треба би кипіло, а пак треба забрати всіх сусідів, бо то резко полупити, або не погнило.
And now all this work will go to waste, because border closures have curtailed tourism, and there are no buyers for these wares. Family businesses are bearing the brunt, as shops filled to the brim with wicker products have no footfalls whatsoever.
Воно се робить, що йде не лаковано. Якщо то і лакується, але кошик се лакує зверху, що воно не мішає взагалі. А вони це йде натуральне, а що йде трошки підкрашено, то що трошки підкрашено, воно теж не мішає, бо воно не є, щоб то погано було, то є нормально.
But these pieces of furniture see no interest from shoppers for now. As a result, most of these families are dipping into their savings, hoping that the new year brings more takers for their precious wicker weaves. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
No other day on the calendar faces as much pressure as December 31st, New Year's Eve. People want it to be a magical gateway to new beginnings. On New Year's Eve, the whole world turns into a big party, but this time it is different. Celebrations have been scaled back. Many countries will welcome the new year under a curfew. Adversity also brings out the best in us. Despite strict restrictions, people around the world have found a way to spread the New Year's cheer. Take a look at this.
The Kiwis are a lucky lot. They live on the fringes of the Pacific and naturally ring in the new year first. As always, Auckland's Sky Tower put on a spectacular show. A sizable crowd gathered at the waterfront and at the harbour bridge. Locals say they're the best seats in the house. Across the Tasman Sea, Sydney was forced to truncate its celebrations. There were strict restrictions around the harbour and the Opera House. The show was over in just a couple of minutes. Crossing over into mainland Eurasia, things were even more muted. In the Russian capital, residents flocked to the city centre. Moscow's famous cityscape was draped in lights. There is no lockdown, but all pubs and restaurants must shut by 11 p.m. That's usually when the party starts around here. The scenes are even more dismal in Paris. The city will welcome the new year under a curfew. With partying ruled out, Parisians have turned to gourmet food. Some seafood, cheese, and of course, a glass of wine.
The program, it's going to be very simple. We're going to feast just between us in our friend's flat. So it's going to be quiet. We're going to have a little meal based on fish, cheese and things like that.
Across the channel, the United Kingdom is on a tight vigil. Edinburgh's New Year celebrations were called off. It was replaced by a drone show. 150 drones took to the skies in a choreographed flight, the largest Britain has ever seen. Together, the drones played out the story of Farewell, an award-winning poem. Thousands of miles away in Buenos Aires, a wine shop summed up 2020 with a special bottle. It's called 2020 LPQTP, an acronym for Merry Year. Interestingly, those are the same initials of a popular Argentine insult. And yes, it was very much on purpose.
In a funny way, with all that this year has meant, let's say it was the right farewell for 2020.
In the United States, Times Square is all decked up. The Waterford Crystal Ball has been prepped for its midnight drop. Production crews are busy setting up the stage for some top-notch performers. Justin Bieber, Jennifer Lopez and Machine Gun Kelly are all slated to perform. Ryan Seacrest will be returning to host the event for a 16th straight time. It's a great lineup, but unfortunately, there will be no in-person viewing. 2020 was the year when Earth came to a standstill, or so we thought. No matter what the adversity or the challenges, at the end of the day, the calendar will flip and life will go on. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, it's a wrap for the show and the year. From us, we're wishing you a very happy new year, hoping it brings you health and happiness. Leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
Dua kan? Ya, okay.